In 2011, the WWE needed new stars, with the recent departures of Shawn Michaels, Batista, and others. At that moment, Triple H, the legend who had an important role behind the scenes now, had an idea. The Federation will sign a luchador who is an icon in Mexico and make him the successor of Rey Mysterio, this little wrestler that we all loved. He certainly didn't imagine it, but this project will turn into a disaster. It's a delight to meet you on the Wrestling Paradise to tell you the story of Sin Cara, one of the biggest WWE failures of all time. You will discover, among other things, why he refused to train at the company's developmental center, how he left the organization after 3 years while he was on the cover of one of its video games, but also the secrets behind the use of a fake Sin Cara, what his impressive injury at Money in the Bank was really hiding, and even how one of his friends once pointed a gun at his compatriot Alberto Del Rio. And you will never guess why one of his t-shirts became a joke on the internet. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, Sin Cara, from Rey Mysterio's successor to failure. Here we go. In 2011, something tremendous happened. The WWE seemed to have found the next Rey Mysterio. His name was Sin Cara, and his arrival at the American Federation aroused a lot of enthusiasm among the fans. But nothing happened as we could have imagined. The Mexican's time in the Stanford company will turn into a complete disaster. First of all, we must be sufficiently aware of the excitement that surrounded the upcoming debut of Sin Cara. It wasn't just his resemblance to Rey Mysterio, the most famous luchador that many young fans adored. He had the incredible privilege of having a press conference set up for his signing in the world's biggest sports entertainment company.
Cara is now a part of WWE.
It is a very rare event, which gave it even more importance, the pro wrestling equivalent of Cristiano Ronaldo being presented to the fans for his signing at Real Madrid in soccer. Beyond that, his arrival in the Federation caused a lot of reactions in the wrestling world. He was not a nobody. He was already a star in Mexico, where he was called Mystico. So Lucha Libre fans already knew him. They even went further when he was signed into Vince McMahon's empire. In their eyes, he was even one of the best wrestlers in the world, with an incredible talent. If we put ourselves in the shoes of those who had never heard of him, there were reasons to be enthusiastic with such a reputation. Let's clarify that it was only based on his athletic abilities in the ring, where he apparently had exceptional agility. It's still important to mention it because you probably know that in the WWE, just wrestling talent was never enough to succeed. On the contrary, the personality and the looks have traditionally been the crucial criteria there. Anyway, the expectations were huge. The company produced short videos about him, made big announcements. The teasers that were shown to viewers starting from March 2011 gave me some hype, personally. We saw the wrestler doing spectacular moves in the ring while he put on his mask, all that with some very original music. A mix between drums and some kind of choir. In the background of the ring, we first saw articles about the Mexican and then the incredible Mayan pyramids of Chichen Itza with some thunder. I must say it was an epic setting, which made a superb reference to Mexican culture, always without a single word and only with music. At the end, there was the name and the logo of Sin Cara. It was really straight to the point, and we understood the message. A great, brilliant wrestler in the ring who is Mexico's pride is coming soon. On the other hand, we could see a problem there. There was no speech, no words. We understood that this new character would express himself only through his moves. There was no other element that made him unique. Everything was centered on the fact that he was a new luchador, and that was considered enough to intrigue us. What is certain is that efforts were being made to favor his chances of triumph. But from that time, there were already some problems. We learned that the Mexican didn't want to go to Florida Championship Wrestling, the company's training center at that time, where the superstars of tomorrow were being trained. They wanted him to go there to learn wrestling again in a way, at least the American Federation style, which is more mainstream and less acrobatic than Lucha Libre, where he came from. When we learn this, we already say to ourselves, Sin Cara considers that he has nothing to learn from the WWE. He already sees himself as a star who has understood everything. He already thinks he has everything he needs to connect with the millions of viewers who will watch him. That's not all. He also refused to learn English. That means that he won't be able to communicate well with his colleagues in the ring, which will increase the chances of injuries, mistakes, all kinds of misunderstandings. There would therefore be no moments when he would speak on the microphone in English, which are nevertheless essential for us to connect to a character. As a matter of fact, we can see that from the get-go. He didn't seem to want to put in the work. His attitude didn't look very humble and hardworking. In his eyes, he was already a star in Mexico. His talent was tremendous. Fortunately for him, the officials understood his position. They will tell themselves that he may be right. They were eager to get him started anyway, given the hype around him. So no training. Sin Cara is immediately sent to the main roster on television because he is ready. At least that's what he seems to believe. Once we had several weeks of videos, it was time for him to officially start on the screen. It's April 4th, 2011, on Monday Night Raw, one of WWE's weekly shows. On that day, the United States champion Sheamus was facing Daniel Bryan, one of the fan favorites who came from the Indies. After his victory, the Irishman allows himself to attack him, despite the referee who tries to prevent him from doing so. At that moment, we got a surprise. Sin Cara arrives.
There he is!
We immediately notice music with drums, blue lighting, and this pretty light blue and golden outfit of the luchador, with his mask of course. Finally, the time had come for him to appear on television. The long-awaited man since his signing has arrived. He runs towards the ring and then graces us with a spectacular entrance during which he jumps over the ropes, with some pyro at the same time. Not perfectly, however, which many internet users will criticize. We must admit it. There was an identity and an attention to detail in terms of production. His entrance was a great show. He then shrivels up Sheamus with high-flying moves, as you might expect. It was clearly impressive from a technical standpoint. For the record, imagine that the secret behind these impressive jumps during his entrance is simply a trampoline. We suspected that with such a high jump, Sin Cara needed a little help, unless he was the world record holder for this thing. A technician was secretly under the ring to then hide the trampoline underneath. Based on what he showed in the ring and this spectacular production around him, there was something to be excited about. The best seemed yet to come for him, at a time when the Federation needed to build new stars with the recent departures of Shawn Michaels, Edge, Batista, and others. Some people were already thinking about the next WrestleMania, where he could maybe challenge Rey Mysterio in a mask versus mask match. From a financial perspective, it was also a success since we saw children with his mask in the crowd. This item sold very well, which could only please Vince McMahon but also Triple H. Indeed, the Cerebral Assassin had an increasingly important role behind the scenes at that time. He was the one who started this strategy of recruiting big names from the Indies, which he will do a lot in the following years when he will be in charge of NXT. Sin Cara represented Triple H's first big signing.
I think the future is in incredible hands with Paul.
It couldn't happen at a better moment since Rey Mysterio was getting injured more and more as he was getting older, obviously. It was also relevant to bet on a Mexican wrestler to become one of the promotion's new stars. There are a lot of Spanish-speaking WWE fans in the world. For example, the video of Sin Cara's debut almost had 10 million views on YouTube in May 2024. Between Mexico, South America, and Spain, we are talking about several millions of people who could love this new wrestler. Afterwards, we will see him wrestle more. He will face Primo, against whom he will still impress us with all his talent between the ropes. In his matches, we can remember a memorable finisher from the top rope.
Primo, he's out of it! What? Oh!
We can still point out a little embarrassing moment in this match against Primo where he missed what they had to do, but that was just a detail. Nevertheless, we could already see he was not in the traditional WWE style. In his wrestling, everything went very quickly as if no move had a physical impact. There was no psychology, he did not convey emotions. But maybe, after all, that's what some of the fans wanted. Do you want to find out how his big debut could lead to a departure about which nobody seemed to care a few years later, and why the marriage between Sin Cara and the company didn't work out? By the end of the video, you will have all the answers, and you will see that this honeymoon phase will very soon be over. After his debut that can be considered successful, Sin Cara will have the chance to wrestle in a team with the biggest WWE star at that time, John Cena. Without the shadow of a doubt, this gave him an even greater exposure and proved the hopes the Federation placed in him. Then he will be drafted to the blue brand, SmackDown. In this kind of transfer window of the company, it was an ideal opportunity for him to become one of the faces of the show. In addition, SmackDown was not broadcast live, unlike Raw. Its matches could be reworked during editing, or even re-recorded in case of problems. On April 29th, he will have a match against Jack Swagger. We immediately notice something new. During the match, there is a kind of special lighting on the ring, rather orange and blue, and the arena was much darker than usual. On a personal note, I must say I like this idea. We try to create a unique atmosphere for our matches, to create a special moment in the show with a real identity. It's very rare for wrestlers to have specific lighting for their matches, and we can see the importance the company gave to him. In addition, When you have a wrestler who almost never speaks and who therefore doesn't show his personality, it is very useful to add some unique production elements to compensate. On the other hand, it is true that we didn't see the action in the ring as well as before, which is nevertheless his biggest quality. We can also imagine that with this darker atmosphere and this mask that covered his eyes, he was not in the best conditions to see everything well. It should also be noted that he didn't always manage to do his entrance right, which was still very important for this character. At the moment, these elements don't seem to have any influence on his popularity. Things will start to really change from his rivalry with the nephew of the legendary Eddie Guerrero, Chavo. They will have several matches together in which Sin Cara will offer us his acrobatic moves, but not only that. Now, he doesn't only miss an entrance from time to time. There were more and more botches, as they are called, these moments when wrestlers miss their moves. Just take the example of their match at the Over the Limit show, which was still his first appearance on pay-per-view. On that day, it was the finish that was poorly executed.
Get this guy.
Let's also take a step back. What we had seen of Sin Cara so far was far from being enough. For the children, he might have been good. It's the easiest audience to conquer. Seeing a masked wrestler doing acrobatics is enough to make them happy, a bit like if they were in front of a superhero movie. They have their favorite character who has moments when he looks cool. There is no need for the slightest psychology for them. Although WWE was in its PG era, where the product became more family-friendly and politically correct, there are not only children watching. Apart from Lucha Libre fanatics, teenagers and adults have no reason to support Sin Cara and want to follow him every week. Acrobatics have their limits. Even his biggest fans will eventually get tired of it if there is only that for months. But let's go back to his journey from his debut. While his mistakes are being noticed more and more, the Mexican is still undefeated when he faces Christian in July 2011. On that day, there was a turning point in his journey. For the first time, he loses. It often happened that wrestlers stayed interesting because they had an unbeaten streak. Now, he no longer had that advantage. In this match, we once again had mistakes. And still, Sin Cara wasn't just facing anybody, Christian being in a rivalry with Randy Orton for the heavyweight title at the same time. We are barely 3 months after his debut, and it's starting to be a lot. The company could lose patience. It wasn't over. Despite all these problems along the way, he was able to participate in the Money in the Bank match. This means he was offered the opportunity to maybe win the briefcase that would give him a title shot for a whole year. An even greater push was possible for the Mexican. But we will quickly lose our enthusiasm. On that day, he will be the victim of a big attack by Sheamus, who will smash him on a ladder. In the aftermath, Sin Cara will be evacuated on a stretcher. To say the least, it was a spectacular scene. In reality, this is a clever WWE strategy. Although we are led to believe this attack had injured him and that he needed several weeks to heal, the truth is he has been suspended. This technique that the wrestling company often uses makes it possible to justify his absence from a storyline perspective. A few years ago, this method would have worked easily, but we are now in the internet and dirt sheets era. The truth quickly ends up being known. The reason Sin Cara was suspended is very simple. The luchador tested positive for a banned substance. Although he will defend himself by saying it was because of an injection from a doctor, he will have no choice but to stay on the sidelines for several weeks. As you can imagine, for a wrestler who is still new in the company, it's a disaster to get suspended. It was a bad sign for the future, and the gap between the expectations there was a few months ago and what we saw so far is getting bigger and bigger. At the end of the summer of 2011, we will see Sin Cara again on SmackDown to face Daniel Bryan. He seemed to start off on the right foot in a match with no botches and had a victory against the man who was Mr. Money in the Bank. That's not all. Right after the match, he offered Bryan to shake hands in a moment of fair play. While Daniel accepted, Sin Cara attacks him with a big kick. So we seem to be heading for a new villain character. It seemed a little weird. He's only been here for a few months, they're trying to make him liked. The children are buying his masks, but now we're going to try to make him hated. We feel that the company doesn't have a clear plan and doesn't know how to use the luchador. The fact is that a few weeks later he will have another confrontation with Daniel Bryan. It is again a rather entertaining match from a technical standpoint. It will nevertheless end with a disqualification of Sin Cara, who started kicking him after blocking him in a corner. Except that we will witness a real shock. While we thought that this new version of the Mexican would be a villain, we can hear his music. We don't really understand what's going on. until another Sin Cara arrives in the arena to come and confront him in the ring. In a scene reminiscent of Spider-Man, we have two Sin Caras facing each other. In fact, it had been several weeks since another performer embodied this character, but the manipulation exploded into the open. In my eyes, it was the first creative and original element from a storytelling standpoint since his debut. The envelope of writing possibilities was open. We wanted to know why there were two Sin Caras, which one was the real one, which one we have seen since April and since Money in the Bank, if there have been any changes along the way that would perhaps explain the botches, with one of the two Sin Caras being more clumsy. It's a scene that also reminds us of the story with the fake Undertaker in the 90s. For the moment, our questions will remain unanswered because the Sin Cara, who has just shriveled Daniel Bryan, is leaving the ring. We got an amusing detail at that time from the legend Booker T, who was on commentary at SmackDown. We are talking about a man who gave us multiple great moments when he had that job.
Ducky. Check this out right here. Quack, quack.
Booker T claimed to have found the difference between the real and the fake Sin Cara. He said he noticed a small black mark on the boots that one had and the other didn't.
A little black mark on his boots that I've been noticing for the last few weeks. I think that's the real one.
Nevertheless, it remains true that we had an opportunity to completely relaunch the luchador with an interesting story. Afterwards, we will have a new match against Daniel Bryan, but this time it will be with the real Sin Cara, who is kinder than his evil double. But it's not just his kindness that differentiates him from his alter ego. He makes mistakes. In this match, we will have little moments of stupidity again. His double, obviously much less clumsy, will come and attack him to steal his spot and win the match. The following week, after the real Sin Cara beats Heath Slater, the fake one will appear on the arena screen. We see him taking off his light blue mask to reveal the same one in black, as if to symbolize the fact he is his dark side in a certain way. I must admit, I would have preferred the mystery to be maintained for longer, that we could not distinguish one from the other for a much longer period. However, the most attentive ones will have noticed that the fake Sin Cara was bigger than the real one. Although they were about the same size, there was about a 30-pound difference between the two men. There was another meaning behind this whole story. In Mexico, the two wrestlers already had the same name. There was a real past between them. But unfortunately, many fans had no idea. Anyway, the two Sin Caras will have a rivalry in which the original will triumph over the imposter by removing his mask in October. Once again, I'm not satisfied because the writers could have imagined much more. The alter ego could do horrible things pretending to be the real one, with a kind of investigation to find out which of the two men would be the real culprit. The alter ego who would be better than him in the ring could haunt the original. It was very easy to imagine interesting scenarios, but in the fall, it was already flushed down the toilet. On the other hand, a new t-shirt with his image was going to be put on sale by the company, which would generate some reactions. We'll keep it classy, but this image amused the internet users a lot, who couldn't help but see a penis in it. The Botches followed Sin Cara in his merchandising, a symbol of his adventure in Vince McMahon's empire, unfortunately. On the other hand, he will be on one of the 3 covers of the WWE 12 video game, which isn't nothing, and which shows how he was considered as one of the faces of the company. In any case, after this story about the fake Sin Cara, the luchador would hardly have more success in his journey. He will seriously injure his knee in November 2011, which will keep him out for several months. This injury could not have happened at a worse time since we were not very far from WrestleMania 28, and the company wanted to set up the dream match against Rey Mysterio there. A rather crazy detail is that the Federation had a very specific project with this masked wrestlers match. It wanted to give masks of both men to all the fans in the arena of the show in order to beat the world record for the number of masks worn at the same time, at the same place. When he returns to the ring, this time wearing red, he will form a team with Rey precisely. His career will go nowhere for a while, and this dream match will finally not take place at the showcase of the Immortals. The one who was the most exciting new name in the WWE in 2011 will fall into anonymity and will not have anything memorable until the summer of 2013, which will mark the end of his adventure for viewers. It should be noted that his last match will take place against his compatriot Alberto Del Rio. On that day, he quickly took a kick from his opponent in the fingers, which injured him. After a jump outside the ring, he had his finger twisted and asked the referee to stop the match. Alberto will not like that and will continue to assault him, despite the end of the confrontation, obviously annoyed by Sin Cara's attitude. Although we imagine his finger injury was painful, it didn't represent much compared to the suffering of Mick Foley, for example, in the famous Hell in a Cell from 1998. Despite a much more serious condition, he didn't ask to stop the match and finished it as planned, so it sent a very negative message. Definitely, WWE and Sin Cara were really not meant to get along. In addition, Alberto Del Rio didn't like his colleague in real life. Several years before, when they were both wrestling in Mexico, Sin Cara's success got to his head, arriving late for his matches, spending his time partying and drinking. On the day when they were supposed to have a match against each other, the masked wrestler arrived 3 hours late. Alberto was very upset and went to talk to him face to face. What he said didn't please a friend of Sin Cara, who pulled out a gun. Fortunately, they will calm down, and according to Alberto, his colleague apologized to him afterwards. After this match, in which he had therefore hit him for real, Alberto asked him where his heart and his passion were. Sin Cara replied that he no longer wanted to be in the WWE. In any case, after that, we won't see him on the screens of the American Federation again. There is, however, a small subtlety. After 2013, the Sin Cara character still existed in the Stamford Federation. The explanation is quite funny. After the original Sin Cara was fired, the wrestler who originally played his evil double took his character and became the real one. He will stay in the main roster for several years, with more success than his colleague. When we analyze the reasons for the original Sin Cara's failure in the WWE, we can glimpse different elements. Some trouble to adapt to the company's wrestling style, and a refusal to learn English, which inevitably had an influence in his many botches in the ring. Also a little bit of clumsiness despite his agility. A lazy writing in which the whole interest of his character was based on his entrance and his acrobatics, an inability to connect with many viewers by relying only on wrestling. Of course, injuries and suspensions at the wrong time, excessive expectations to begin with. The fact is, the luchador will unfortunately remain one of WWE's biggest fiascos. Since the end of his adventure in the Stamford Federation, he has returned to wrestle in Mexico. There, fortunately, he's still considered as a legend. In the end, he would have been better off never leaving. And this is how our documentary about Sin Cara's failure in the WWE ends. Taking a step back on his career in the American Federation, we realize that we probably never had a wrestler who has been presented with so much hype in the company's history. Unfortunately, several problems at the same time made this experience catastrophic, even more so with all the hopes that were placed in him. It's a shame because, on paper, the potential was there with the gradual decline of Rey Mysterio, the huge Spanish-speaking market, and the talent of the Mexican from a purely athletic perspective. This makes me offer you a debate. If you had been in the shoes of Triple H and Vince McMahon at that time, how would you have imagined Sin Cara's first months in the company? We invite you to come and give your opinion. It will be interesting to talk about it together in the comments and to share our ideas. We can say that Sin Cara's journey really was memorable. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the Paradise of Wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?